So today on Simply Happy Conversations, I'm talking with Dr. Satya. She is a chiropractor and an expert in the neurobiology of stress. And today she's going to be sharing with us some tips and ideas around developing your body awareness and also regulating after stress response. And she has a beautiful method, the NeuroFascial flow method. And she'll also share a little bit with us about that. So welcome, Dr. Satya.
Yeah, so happy to be here.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you, to be able to finally coordinate times with one side of the world.
I've spent a lot of time actually on the other side of the world. I've spent a lot of time teaching in Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, do you really?
It's been a long time, actually. It's been several years, but I used to go every year for a couple months and travel around and train doctors over there. Yeah.
Oh, how nice. So maybe share a little bit about yourself. So if you were a Barbie doll, what two accessories would you come with that show the things that you like to do outside of maybe work, or it might be even related to work?
I don't even have no question. I would have like a flowy dance skirt, and I would probably have a rolling pin because I really like baking.
Oh, nice. Is it sweet baking or savory baking or a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. Honestly, when I had a lot of health challenges and I stopped eating all grain, sugar, dairy, like I felt like I couldn't eat anything. And so I reworked a lot of my grandma's recipes to be in line with that, because you can't find, like, now gluten-free and grain-free have become more popularized. But back then, everything gluten-free was rice. And so then I got a rice sensitivity from eating too much rice. So I had to invent muffins and cakes and bread and crackers and everything. I just learned how to bake all over again.
Yeah, and I completely relate to you, because otherwise, if you're buying it from the supermarket, it's maybe got a lot more sugar in it, hasn't it, when it's gluten-free as well?
Yeah.
So just getting back to baking and just changing that flour is, it's a great
really
idea.
Fun too, because it's especially if you have, a lot of my projects are really big and long-term. And so it's nice to be able to do baking that is just like a short-term project. I win, I succeed at it right away, or I don't and I learn something, but it's complete fast,
Yeah, I agree. It's like that. Definitely the trying something new, because it's like, is this going to work with the same recipe, but I'm changing it to gluten-free
but you
flour?
Get instant feedback, within an hour, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much for sharing that. So what about if I work as a professional organizer, and so if I was to come over to you, what would be an area in your home or life that needs organizing and some support with organizing?
That needs organizing.
That needs some help.
I'm very meticulous in my organization, actually. What needs organizing? I mean, I'm always, this isn't so much physical, but I'm always trying to organize all of the different things I have to share, because I grew up in a family full of holistic healthcare. There's so many things I want to be able to share with the world, and I always need help organizing my thoughts into what's the best way to help people with this and not overwhelm them.
Oh, beautiful. And I love that sort of work too, working with businesses around organizing what we're going to do next, because they've got so many ideas, don't they?
That is probably where I need the most organization.
Yeah.
I would be delighted to reorganize literally anything. I love interior design and organizing things.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. You either love it or you don't. And it's one or the other, really, isn't it? And you just would love someone to come in and do it if you're not that type of person. I don't know, like me, I just get such a dopamine hit from organizing. So
it's so fun.
So share with us some of the neurological symptoms and chronic pain that you hear from people regularly. And even, if you're happy to share your own story as well.
Yeah, my story is very intertwined with, who shows up in my world. I think we attract people into our sphere that we can help. And a lot of times, we are the first client that existed, right? and
I'm definitely
no exception to that. I personally struggled with really severe, progressive, mysterious neurological symptoms and chronic pain for over a decade as a teenager and young adult before anyone knew what was wrong. I had headaches, dizziness, nausea, ringing in my ears, burning eye pain, electric shocks down my arms and legs, left-sided muscle weakness and right-sided twitching. It was crazy. It just, the list goes on. And doctors thought maybe I had fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, POTS, multiple sclerosis, like Lyme disease. Nobody could figure it out. And it turns out I had a condition that's actually extremely common, but misdiagnosed a lot of the time because you need an upright MRI to see it. When you lay down, which is a traditional MRI, gravity changes where the brain sits and they miss it. The condition is actually that my brain got herniated out of my skull into my neck. Just a few millimeters, not this far. But that means that the fluid flow doesn't work as well, and my brainstem and that part of my brain gets squished, and that causes a lot of problems. And it's actually what a lot of my clients have, who knew they had it, but also at this point, I've had people come from all over the world who didn't know what was going on. Doctors gave up on because they have weird symptoms that nobody can figure out. And it often can be traced back to, especially if you've ever had whiplash or a concussion or an epidural, there's different things that can cause your risk goes up for this condition. And it sounds scary and crazy, and it is, your brain's sticking out. But 1 in 20 people with neck pain who've never had a head injury have some degree of brain herniation. And if you've ever had whiplash or a concussion, like fell out of a tree when you were a kid and your parents told you to walk it off, like not necessarily a diagnosed concussion, but any head injury, and you have neck pain, it's 1 in 4 people. So
huge,
that's
isn't it?
super common. And then the other big chunk of people who've come to see me that turns out have a lot of similar symptoms actually are kids with autism, dyslexia, schizophrenia, like neurosensory integration challenges, and their stressed out parents who are caring for high needs kids. Me with traumatic brain injury and those other groups of people share a lot of symptoms because the nervous system gets dysregulated for a lot of different reasons, but then it causes this host of symptoms that often get treated separately, but they're actually all very related, which can include getting overwhelmed easily and brain fog, cognitive challenges, which is going to be really difficult to organize anything when
Exactly.
when you're struggling with that brain fog. And that's a real hallmark actually of not necessarily the brain condition of the brain herniation, not necessarily that, which, just so listeners know, that's called cerebellar tonsillar ectopia, or Chiari malformation, if it's more than 5 millimeters herniated. But not necessarily even with that condition, just being stuck in this chronic alarm mode in the nervous system causes, like, the majority of symptoms people struggle with today. Honestly, it's crazy, like how much it creates more anxiety, depression, brain fog, reproduction and hormone balance is less of a priority. Digestion is deprioritized, and so those things don't work as well. And instead, you have more hypersensitivity. You're more reactive, more on edge, and so that's all a normal part of a stress response if you're trying to fight for your life from a tiger or run away. But we get stuck in it for a long time, and there's just so many people stuck in that, especially in the past 5 years of extra insanity.
Have you seen that? Like in the relation to even long COVID and COVID as well, like that connection between it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of emotional stress that's amplifying for people, but also, yes, post-COVID infection also that puts a tremendous amount of metabolic and immunological stress on the system that can get stuck if you were already vulnerable because your body was holding stored tension patterns from unresolved injury or previous trauma where you went into like a guarded mode, and the body stores that as a splinting pattern. If you were already in that state, that means your brain isn't getting the normal movement signals that help it calm back down after any kind of a stressor. And so then you get a major stressor like an infection, and it just knocks you off and you stay stuck in it if you have this underlying structural restriction that's actually making your nervous system more vulnerable and not able to recover from the stressors that you're experiencing.
Yeah. And like I've seen lots of your videos, which are great, and just that opening up of the chest.
Yeah.
it all makes sense. It's like if you can't open your chest and let the breath in, like how can you expect your nervous system to even calm down?
It's going to be so much like focus for stress management, which even that I put the quotes on because people like when we talk about stress, people usually just think emotional stress. And I'm like, no, you can have physiological stress, somatic stress. But there's a lot of benefit that can come from doing breathing exercises. But one of the most common fascia restrictions I see is the rib cage being all glued to itself, which my theory is because the brain is trying to like protect your vital organs by turning it into armor, basically, your rib cage. But then it won't expand around the circumference of your rib cage for breathing. And so you end up needing to use the muscles that lift your rib cage up into your neck to lift it to get that pressure gradient to breathe. But then you have chronic neck tension, which causes not just pain and discomfort, but it also will send a lot of alarm signals to the brain, keeping it in an alarm response, even if you didn't have emotional stress, even if you didn't have metabolic stress.
Yeah. So then you've got this response as well, haven't you? Like the shoulders up and the neck. Yeah.
And which leaves you vulnerable to additional injury.
In
So a way that people are like, all I did was bent over and then I couldn't stand up. It didn't just happen.
Yeah. So share a bit about then the like for you, the neuroFascial flow method and how it works, and then maybe like how it actually supports us.
Sure. So there's a couple of pieces. So neuroFascial flow method is not necessarily just a protocol. It's kind of like how yoga is a system of thinking. NeuroFascial flow method is similar in that it's giving a lens through which to view your healing process or your client's healing process. And so there's a really important foundational base that's around how do we create a container in which safety can happen, or a container in which change can happen, where the system feels safe to be receptive to change. I think all of us are familiar with the concept of psychological safety and like feeling safe with another person, with a provider, with, family or whatever it is. But there's also a deeply important thing with somatic safety and the body physically feeling safe enough, especially to change if you're trying to do any kind of therapeutic thing like loosen fascia adhesions, which is a central tenet of neuroFascial flow method because your fascia contains a really high density of receptors that are meant to, when you just move in your normal life, help keep stress at bay. So you get alarm signals that trigger you into fight or flight in the brain, but then what's called proprioception are the signals that go when you move. It's from both deep pressure actually and movement. And so if you have places in the body that are stuck, that are bracing and splinting from old unresolved or unprocessed trauma, then your brain is starving for that proprioceptive feedback. And so neuroFascial flow method says, well, we need to restore the fluid adaptability where you have that joints and soft tissue all articulating and flowing fluidly in the body and having the capacity to articulate through everything because of how it signals and mirrors into the neurological adaptability. But because fascia has such a strong protective function, and oftentimes we're bracing and splinting because of unresolved trauma, you can't just go in there and rip it all open, which, you can, but it causes nervous system dysregulation. That's why so much PT and chiropractic and massage can, like, best case, you're just doing the same thing over and over because they loosen something and an hour later you're like, I felt great, but now I'm tight again. Or in more tough cases, what happens is your body goes, oh, that didn't feel safe. And it triggers a boomerang response where you go into greater protective mode and nervous system dysregulation. So neuroFascial flow method is designed to first help establish safety in your nervous system so that there's a receptivity to change, and then do the fascia releases on your body, which is going to be through a combination of movement therapy. I've combined in some Eastern, more energetic approaches, as well as Western physical neurostructural components. So you might do some self-massage, but you also know how to read your nervous system and be able to say, oh, as I start doing this release, if that's too triggering, I, one, know how to identify that. And two, I know how to recover if I accidentally trigger it. And three, I have other methods to say, maybe I need an energetic release, or maybe I'll use some acupressure, or I'll use this visualization. And so you have the tools to be able to say, how do I unravel the layers of stored tension in a way that actually feels safe and that lasts, so that I can ultimately get back to fluid physically and mirroring into my neurological and emotional resilience as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that whole around awareness, isn't it? Knowing what you need and
Yeah,
changing, because we're not the same every day. Things change
that's right.
around us, don't they?
It's like I don't think that you should blindly listen to me or anyone else. Like I
Mm.
don't know the protocol that's best for your body. I know how to teach you to learn your body's language because it is talking to you. It absolutely will tell you what is good, what helps it feel expansive and amazing and in healing mode, because the body is self-healing. It's self-regulating. It knows how to care for itself. But if it's stuck in this adaptive alarm mode, you gotta help it come out of that in a way that actually is in partnership with the body. I'm a dancer, and I do a lot of partner dancing, like Brazilian zouk. I used to dance salsa and bachata, but partner dancing, like there's I've done a bit of, I mostly am a follow, but I've also done a bit of leading. And it's really similar actually to when I do body work on someone, which is I want to be making suggestions, but I don't want to be bossing their body around. Like if you've been the follow in
Mm.
a partner dance, you know when the lead is just, dragging your body around, that is not nice. We do not like that. We want, how about a suggestion? What if we flow with it? What if we do this? And it's more about creating invitations. And there's such a beautiful community that we have, because it's all online now. We have this beautiful community from all over the world of people learning how to um, how to enrich their relationship with their own body and be able to read its signs and say, take Dr. Satya's ideas for a fascia release, but then here's how to navigate it in your own system. And here's how to even know when it's time for external help, because I can help you, through a virtual platform. I can give you stuff you can do to release maybe 50 to 70% on your own. But there's always going to be, I don't know how to make it so you don't need any outside help, but I know how to help you choose what providers are going to help, and be able to interact, like what you can do before and after your sessions, so that you get better results, not just from body work, but even from psychotherapy, changing core beliefs, because all change is hard, even in the right direction. And when we can figure out how to navigate and help the body feel safe with that change, it's not only going to yield much more profound change, but also going to be more lasting and integrated into your new sense of self in the brain.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's really embracing the whole trauma understanding, isn't it? And
Yeah.
integrating safety, which we seem to understand a lot more about than we did years ago. And it's great to be
Really
seeing that
something.
now. Like the importance of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I love that you're so focused. I just want to say, like, this is kind of a side thing, but that you're focused in organization is really cool, because that's like the default of nature is like that's
Mm.
intelligence is what organizes out of chaos. We have the chaos and entropy of the universe, but then we can use our intelligence, and the innate intelligence of the body goes into a greater organization through that application of applying intelligence to the chaos. And I think that's such a beautiful metaphor for what the body does internally, and then you can take that and help it be an expression in your outer world. My
Mm.
parents told me
Yes.
that my inner world is a reflection, or my outer world is a reflection of my inner world. And like my dad was like, okay, your desk, if the surface of your desk is a mess, like your mind surface is probably a mess. It's going to be difficult to think. If your basement is a mess, like what's going on with your subconscious, and like how the home actually reflects your internal environment. And so it's such a powerful thing. Like somebody might not think. I mean, I don't know what your listeners are. I'm sure they're all very advanced and already thinking this, but I think a lot of people would go, "Oh, an organizer, like that's cool, but whatever." And I'm like, "No, that's actual healthcare. Like that's
Oh,
mental
yeah,
health,
definitely.
majorly."
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just
Like they're
it's
the people that I'm working with are people who have got real challenges with executive functioning for a start, but that's
yeah,
because of something else, or it is physical, like it might be a physical limitation because of some of these stress responses, basically,
Absolutely.
and conditions that you've talked about are at play. And it's really difficult to get down on the ground or, bend over and pick things up when you've got extreme pain in your legs, in your arms, which is that stress response. So is there anything that you would recommend that people could do, or like even myself with a client, when they're about to organize a room and they're feeling stuck because of the guilt, or whether it's the shame of what's happening around them? What's some sort of movements that we could do to help us before we even start?
Yeah, I will teach you two things. So both of these are designed to basically, it's like a supplement to feed your brain extra proprioceptive feedback because it's starving for it. Ultimately, you're going to want to figure out where there's stuck places in your body and loosen them, because this will be a temporary response, but it opens a window of access to allow you to go into a session in a way that is more receptive and feeling calmer. So one of them, my favorite one that's the most accessible, I call it squeeze hugs, because it's just like a good hug. Some hugs don't feel good, but a good hug. And you're just going to take the palm of your hand with your fingers together. It's not with claw fingers, you're not squeezing, but you're kind of creating this wave-like motion with the palm of your hand onto anywhere in your body. So I'll grab my arms, my wrists, my hands. The receptors are in joints as well as soft tissue. So I'm just like gently compressing the joints in my hands, in my wrist, in my arm. And it's not massage. So like if I find, oh, this muscle's tight, let me try to massage. No, that's not, you can do it later, but that's not what this is. This is, and if something hurts, just skip it, because this is a global response. And you can see I've been doing this for 10 seconds now, and my voice tone just dropped and slowed down. I didn't do that on purpose. I was getting buzzy and excited because I was talking, and I probably had some sympathetic nervous system fight or flight going. And this just like that fast. It seems silly simple. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna squeeze and give myself a hug. But it's crazy how fast it actually will create a shift, which is so cool. And so, I'm doing it on my arms right now because it's easy to reach, but I could just as easily sit down and do it on my feet and just like wiggle the joints around a little bit and maybe wring my foot out like a little sponge, but gently, you're not trying to force change. You're just saying, oh, hello, like wiggling everything around and giving it giving it some reassuring squeezes.
Oh no, I love that.
So that's the one that I do the most. And then there's a movement one that I also do a lot that I'll show you, which is, so the spine has the highest density of proprioceptors in the body. And so if you can find a way to articulate through all of the joints, or as many as possible, that will feed your brain a ton of healthy proprioception. And it's more efficient, even than the hands, than the squeezes. So what's important about this, though, is that we often have jammed up joints in the spine or fascia adhesions around the rib cage. And so what you don't want to do is do this too big, because you'll run into the sticky places and trigger alarm signals. So I'm going to show it to you first, but then hang on and I'll show you how you'll probably do it, because I want you to see the shape. So it's kind of that I'm going to imagine I'm like seaweed planted underwater. And don't worry, we can breathe underwater. No anxiety there. So underwater, and you can do it standing or sitting. I'm standing right now, but you can do it sitting. So you imagine your sit bones are like your roots planted in the sand, and you're between two panes of glass. So you can only move side to side. You're not going to go in the forward space or the back space. We're just going to go side to side gently, like I'm made of seaweed, seeing if I can articulate from the bottom all the way up to the top. But I'm doing this big enough so you can see the shape, but you're probably going to end up doing it so super small, because with everything that I ever teach, it should feel somewhere between neutral and awesome. If it's at all less than neutral, if you can't breathe smoothly, if it aggravates any pain or symptoms, if your heart rate goes up, it's too much. And this is actually the number one skill I teach in the program, is we go into it more deeply, but it's how to tune into your nervous system and know if it's going into alarm mode at all. And that's a much better metric than whether you can tolerate something. like pain tolerance or discomfort, or it's like, I don't know, I'm stressed about this organization project, but let's just do it. Let's just power through.
Mm-hmm.
What ends up happening is you've now had your brain associate that change, even if it's quote unquote a good thing, a positive thing, it's now associated with danger. And so it's more likely you have more resistance, and you want to just go back to the way you were, like you're just going to make a mess again, you know? And so what you do is if you feed your brain a lot of these proprioceptive signals beforehand, then you're more likely to actually integrate that and be receptive. And so even with the seaweed move, it is a change. And so it's a helpful thing, but you got to make sure you do it right so that you don't trigger your nervous system.
Yeah,
So
that
that's
makes
why I also
sense.
teach the squeezes, because if somebody can't figure out, like with the side seaweed, you might try going smaller or smoother, or just don't do it if you can't do it without aggravating your nervous system. It might be a thing that you need to do some fascia release before you do that particular move. But for some people, they'll feel great and say, "Oh yeah, let me do it." Um, so yeah,
Oh, like me, I could feel I was doing it,
yeah,
and I don't have some of my reflexes aren't integrated properly. So I was starting to feel like car sick.
yeah,
So that's another thing which I know that we're working with my son on some integration of his
yeah,
reflexes. And when I do some of them, I'm like, oh, I know myself, I need to do the work as
yeah.
well because they're not integrated.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You're talking about reflex integration. I had all of my reflexes, like I was used as an example in my neurological diagnosis class in chiropractic school because I had everything wrong. Um, and I worked with some incredible experts trying to do some integration exercises. And it went okay, but a lot of times it was really difficult for me to do them. Like my system, I had a lot of resistance to integrating
Yeah.
them. And what I noticed is that when I started calming my nervous system with, it's interesting because the reflexes not being integrated definitely does aggravate the alarm mode. So it's a chicken and
Mm.
egg thing. But if you use, what I found is if I use these somatic based practices to alleviate the mechanical causes of the alarm mode, then my brain actually went into healing mode where it's prioritizing development and they integrate it on their own.
Oh,
And
that's
I've seen
great.
that with patients. Actually, I had a clinic um, in Portland, Oregon for many years. And in the first couple months, I had an OT clinic flood my practice. I couldn't take new patients for like 6 months because they sent everyone to me after we had one shared patient, this little boy who had autism. He was 10 years old. And they'd been taking care of him for a year with good results on their metrics. He's doing great. But I saw him for 4 weeks. I kept seeing him. But after 4 weeks, the head of the OT clinic called me and she's like, "What OT have you been doing with him? Because even though he did great in the past year, according to our standards, in the past 4 weeks, he's made light years of progress past more than the past year." And I said, "I haven't done any OT exercises, not a single one. All I did was nervous system regulation and reducing the tension on his spinal cord through the fascia, like calming down the structural alarm signals." And then he was actually able to integrate what they did. So she said, "I
Yeah,
need
that's
you to
great.
come and train all my OTs, please, and also take care of all our patients." And I'm like, "I'll do my best."
And that's what it is. It's understanding all of the steps that we need to help our bodies feel safe, to be
Yeah.
able to do that. And I'm straight away, I'm already like, that is the first thing that I want to do with my clients when we get there.
Yeah.
To work with them is
And
definitely your
afterwards.
pressure. Yeah.
Absolutely. So neurofascial flow method has a 5-step process to facilitating change. It's really about the container in which change happens, right? So step 1, establish safety.
Mm.
Proprioception is the easiest way to do it. Step 2, facilitate a softening. That's like an invitation. "Hey, do you maybe want to do this change? What do you think?" "Oh yeah, I actively want to do it." Like getting someone to say yes instead of fine, that's okay. Like say yes, I'm making this choice. And then step 3 is you do whatever the change is, but you do it only to the point that you're not irritating the alarm mode. So
Yeah.
you do as much change as you can to the nervous system's tolerance to integrate. And then you reestablish safety. So afterward, you can use proprioception again
Mm.
to say, "Okay, we're good. We're calm. We like this. We can integrate this." And then you practice integrating and adapting. You're like, maybe if you had just cleaned your house and organized, you take a walk around, you really take it in. You're like, let me say, yeah, this is my home now. This is the new set point. And I do that with people in their bodies. I say, now try actually using your lungs your rib cage to breathe more and take up the space that's newly available so that you can make a new set point of normal. And then you repeat that process concentrically bigger and deeper. And it really up spirals that healing process.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh, it's so great. And I definitely think there'll be listeners who'll be like, yes, I'll start to integrate a few of those things to help them continue with feeling safe around organising. So what's one thing that you would recommend to the listeners to support their nervous system before going?
Just adding some light because it's getting dark over
here. It's dark. That's all right. Thank you. So what's one thing you would do for the listeners could do for themselves to help regulate their nervous system?
I would say if you do these squeeze hugs for, I don't know, 10 seconds to a minute, like 20 times a day, a bunch. Just start your day doing it for a couple minutes, wake your brain up in the morning, and then just do it throughout the day. Whenever you think of it, you can do the squeeze hugs. You can squeeze your arms, your feet. You can do little tiny side seaweeds, tiny, only if they're not triggering, tiny, because it's the number of joints that are articulating that matters, not how big you move. How big you move literally, like it matters for doing fascia release with it, but not for this part, not for regulating your nervous system. So I would say that's the most powerful thing that you could do is if you did that every day, a bunch of times throughout your day for the next week, you will feel very different next week. You'll feel more clear-headed. You'll feel calmer. You'll find you're less reactive to upsetting situations. You're more tolerant. And if you're in chronic pain, that will likely decrease.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, you've been a wealth of knowledge. I'm so grateful that you've made the time to come on and share some of your information, but also your experience as well. How can people connect with you?
I try to post a ton of free content on TikTok, actually, and also Instagram. My handle is the same on both places. It's Dr. Satya Wellness, DrSatya Wellness, WELLNESS. So I'm Dr. Satya Wellness on both TikTok and Instagram. My website's drsatyawellness.com. And I always keep the most up-to-date resources linked in my profiles on those social platforms and obviously on my website as well.
Yes, I highly recommend going and watching your videos on both platforms because they're really easy to listen to and easy to watch. And yeah, I'm sure people will get amazing results. Thank you so much again for your time, Dr. Satya.
Absolutely. It's been such a delight. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. That was so lovely. And I just love that. I will definitely be using that with clients. I'll let you know how I go and what they say because it makes sense. It's so funny because I did a professional organising workshop a couple of weeks ago on hoarding behaviours, and the woman was also talking about the safety, but she's like, we need to be able to integrate this after. Like how can we and knowing that point where you go, okay, that's enough. Because it's really hard with the family services around saying, no, but you've barely done anything. And it's like, yeah, but we have to establish the safety first before we can get to a point of seeing amazing results.
Somebody by taking away all their items that make them feel safe.
Yes.
Especially if they have a history of like trauma and lack, like food insecurity or something like where they didn't have enough of what they needed. And so,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. And